I want to ask you more about the Supreme Court. We just saw this past week, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization go to the United States Supreme Court. It's going to take a hard look at whether or not Casey v. Planned Parenthood and, of course, Roe v. Wade, if the fundamentals there in those cases should be overturned. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in her life, had suggested that she didn't like the way that Roe v. Wade was decided, that the legal reasoning in the case wasn't strong. Do you think Roe v. Wade should be overturned? And what do you think of sort of the reasoning that Justice Blackmun and others used to arrive at that decision?
Well, I was a critic of Roe versus Wade when it was first rendered. I didn't think there was a sufficient justification for taking the issue from the public and giving it to the courts. And I wrote that, and I was criticized for it, but I don't think it should be overruled. I think when you have a 50-year decision that gives people rights, gives people fundamental rights, you don't take them away just because of a shift of personnel in the Supreme Court.
So, some cases, of course, at some point have to reach that threshold. So if it was a bad decision over time, right? I mean, there have been cases that have been overturned that have been looked back at, most famously Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yeah, but very rarely have cases been overturned when they granted rights. Usually they've been overturned when they take rights away. Obviously, gay rights that had been taken away and then granted. This would be a very rare case in which the right of a woman to choose abortion for 50 years has been taken away. And by the way, just because the logic of the decision was wrong, doesn't mean the result was necessary.
But can I make the point that any pro-life listener is probably thinking right now?
Sure.
The rights of the child have been deprived. The rights to life have been deprived by a decision like this.
But if you take that argument to its logical conclusion, it means that the Constitution prohibits abortion. That means that the states could not allow abortion, that California and New York would not allow abortion. Because if there is a fetus and the fetus has rights, obviously the rights of the fetus have to trump any other rights of the woman. So the argument goes much, much too far. And even Justice Kavanaugh said the Supreme Court should be neutral on abortion. But there are those, and I think Justice Barrett has written in the past about the right to life, and the right to life would preclude the states from actually allowing a woman to have abortion. We would become one of the only countries in the modern age that absolutely prohibited abortion, even if the legislature permitted it. So,
maybe so. But one last point. I know Jason wants to jump in here. That the Roe v. Wade case concluded that the government can't say that there's a blanket right to abortion throughout the existence of a pregnancy, right? So, in other words, like Roe v. Wade drew this arbitrary line of where the government can begin regulating the issue of abortion during a pregnancy. So even Roe v. Wade as a case decided that, no, this shouldn't be a boundless right. There should be restrictions on this because the life of that child does play a meaningful role.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And we have very inconsistent positions on that. For example, a person who believes in the right to choose and doesn't believe that the fetus is a person would certainly permit prosecution of somebody who deliberately kicked a pregnant woman and ended her pregnancy against her will, both because he affected the right of the woman and because there is a child, and the child in the fetus was killed. And so, it's a very difficult area. You say arbitrary line, any line would be arbitrary. There are those who believe the minute the zygote, I can't talk about the science, but the minute the conception occurs, that's human life. And there are others who would say, no, it's viability. And there are others who would say, no, even at the very end, you can terminate a pregnancy. The question is who makes that decision, not whether the decision should be made. It has to be made. Is the decision of the woman, the decision of the doctor, the decision of the legislature, or the decision of the courts? And the courts haven't made a strong enough case for why it should be relegated to the courts rather than the legislature. But I do think that 50 years of precedent should not be overruled just because there's a change of personnel.